Welcome, everybody, to the latest edition of the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, brought to you by Bet Rivers. Coming up on today's podcast, if you missed it earlier today, well, you don't miss it now. The ultimate flip-flop, the biggest, most sudden flip-flop in my 25-plus year career. It'll be 26 years for me in the business in May. I would say this is my most sudden and huge flip-flop ever. And I know a lot of you missed it. So that's coming up in a little bit. The changes. The Browns did not fire their head coach or their general manager, but that doesn't mean everybody's kept their job. We'll get to that. We'll talk about where the Browns are picking in the draft, plus the Cavs with their most anticipated game of the year coming up on Wednesday night. That's all on today's edition of the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, brought to you by Bet Rivers.
You're watching Adam the Bull on the Bet Rivers Network.
By the way, coming up on Wednesday's podcast, that's January the 8th, if you're listening to this on a different day from when it came out, I'm going to have Joe Thomas for the first time, not for the first time ever, but for the first time this year, obviously. He'll be the first guest of 2025. And then Dustin joins me for the first time this year on Thursday, the 9th. So we look forward to the Bull and Fox edition, of course. Let's get right into it. Yesterday, on Saturday's podcast, yesterday on Twitter, I was saying that Kevin Stefanski should be fired. I've been saying Kevin Stefanski should be fired for much of the last month. This is after 4+ years of consistently defending Kevin Stefanski and thinking he had something going here. This season went so terribly wrong that all my confidence in Kevin Stefanski had been shot by the time we got to the end of the season this weekend. And after tweeting about it and after commenting about it quite often, I am now pulling the ultimate flip-flop today, as I said, the biggest of my career. So I don't want to fire Kevin Stefanski anymore. And there's a number of reasons why, but one of them is information I got from somebody inside the league last night that made me believe that Kevin Stefanski's going to have more free reign of this offense than he ever has before. Now, we got the first glimpse of that possibility when Kevin Stefanski spoke yesterday to the media. And we got another piece of that today, Monday, when Andrew Berry spoke to the media. But I'm going to be honest here. The biggest reason why is just a gut feeling changed inside of me. And if you know me and you know my career, it takes a lot usually to change my mind. I'm not prone to a quick change of thought. Usually it's got to be a lot of information that makes me change my opinion. So now all the people that were mad at me for saying Stefanski should be fired, maybe they won't be mad. I don't care, or maybe they'll just bust my balls for being a flip-flopper. But now the people that were with me on firing Stefanski, those people are going to be mad. It is what it is. A lot of it, like I said, is just gut. But there's more to it than that. I try to pride myself on not being prisoner of the moment. You have to take everything into account when you make a big decision like fire him. Now, ultimately, I'm not firing or hiring. It's always funny to me when people say, you guys got Baker pushed out. You guys got whoever. You guys wanted him out. You got him out. Football teams don't make decisions based on what I or other members of the media say. If they do, that's on them. That's pathetic. Don't blame me for that. Don't blame anybody else for that. That's on the decision maker with the team. If a team is so fragile that they're going to listen to what I say on a podcast or the radio or TV and change their opinion based on it, well, that's pretty stupid, and that's on them, and they're the wrong person to run a team. So I don't take it lightly changing my decision. I think if you've listened to me for the last month, every time I talked about firing Kevin Stefanski, there was always a tiny bit of hesitation for me. And for whatever reason, after going on and on about it just yesterday, I really thought about it last night. I re-listened to Kevin Stefanski's press conference. I listened to Andrew Berry's press conference today. I listened to a friend who gave me some information last night, and I was really reflective on the whole thing. And part of me, even though I had talked myself into changing my mind, there was part of me that didn't want to admit that today, and I was just going to double down on what I said about firing Stefanski and just force myself to stick with that opinion because I didn't want to be a flip-flopper. And I always talk about being genuine and keeping it real. And if that means I look stupid for flip-flopping, that's how it has to be. But so there's a number of, and so as I said, in the moment, things look really bad. Kevin Stefanski did a bad job as head coach this year. He said it. Andrew Berry, I'm much less convinced on Andrew Berry. The only reason because I've been wanting to fire Andrew Berry longer than Kevin Stefanski, and I was more convinced about that. And I'm still not convinced that Andrew Berry's the right guy. However, in the end, the reason I would also still keep Andrew Berry has more to do with his relationship with Kevin Stefanski and the fact that if you do bring in a new GM, you'd really have to give him an opportunity to hire his coach. I don't like bringing in a new GM at this point who hasn't worked with Stefanski. So I feel like those guys are tied at the hip. They're either going to get it back together in the 25 season or it's going to fall apart. There will be no more mulligans for this group. 2020, I'm not saying they got to win the Super Bowl. I'm not even saying they have to make the playoffs in 2025. But it has to be abundantly clear that this organization is headed in the right direction in 2025. If that doesn't happen, if they have another miserable season, then these guys are going to be out. And then I'll be sending them out the door, and there'll be no changing the mind on that. I want to see these guys get one more chance to get this done. They've had success as a group. In my opinion, more Stefanski than Berry, but I've decided I'm keeping them together, and that's just how I'm looking at it. There's been more good than bad despite the overall record. And so all of those things combined, not after I had a chance to calm down, think about it, led me to change my opinion on this. I'm not convinced Kevin Stefanski's a great coach, but I'm definitely not convinced he's a bad coach. I've said many times, I think there's 3 to 5 elite coaches, 3 to 5 horrible coaches, and everybody else is somewhere in the middle, and it depends on the talent. I thought Kevin Stefanski had a chance to be in that top 3 to 5, which is why I've been on his bandwagon for so long. I'm no longer convinced of that, but I realized in the last 24 hours, I'm still not completely unconvinced of that. So that's why I wanted to give him one more shot with Deshaun Watson off the table. And that's exactly what the case is. Yesterday, in his press conference, Kevin Stefanski talked about essentially, I'll paraphrase, we're going back to my system. They fired Ken Dorsey. He's a bum of a coach. He's terrible. They fired the offensive line coach. Kevin Stefanski, whether it was his decision or he's forced, doesn't matter. They decided to change his style of offense and go and make everything about Deshaun Watson. It was a failure from the moment it started. He can't play. It's over. Today in Andrew Berry's press conference, he said Deshaun Watson has had a setback in his rehab from an Achilles tear. Now, I'm not a doctor, and I'm much older and a million times worse shape than Deshaun Watson. However, I did tear my Achilles, and I don't understand what kind of setback you could have. He didn't re-tear it. What kind of setback could it have? Did him being in a boot or a cast lead to him hurting another part of his leg? It just seems fishy. This is just the beginning of him being off the team. Now, he may technically still be on the roster for this year and maybe 26 as well, but he is not going to play. It's clear based on what Andrew Berry said when asked. Mary Kay put it right up there for him. If he gets healthy, do you still think he can play at an elite level? He wouldn't even answer. He did answer, and his answer was, we just got to get him healthy. Kevin Stefanski made it clear, talking about, hey, we're going back to what works. Jack Conklin, Joel Bitonio, these guys all said it without specifically mentioning Deshaun. It was very clear as an organization after Sunday and Monday's press conferences that they have moved on, whether it's even if not technically on the roster, they have moved on from Deshaun Watson. There will be a new quarterback room. Frankly, I think it should be completely different. I'd move on. I'd cut DTR. There's no point in keeping him around. The Browns are going to draft a quarterback. I don't know if it's going to be with the second overall pick. That depends what they think of Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, whoever's there at 2. There's been a buzz now for Drew Aller. Is it Aller? I can never remember how to pronounce his name. And he's from Medina, so I should know it, but I think it's Aller. But I should know that. It's a bad job out of me. But right now he's not. He said he's going back to Penn State. There is some thoughts that he might change his mind. It depends. If they believe one of these guys is going to be great, then you got to draft him at 2. If not, you don't draft a quarterback just to draft a quarterback. You've got to be all in and believe it. But they'll draft a quarterback at some point, and you draft whatever round it may be, and you bring in another veteran. Different. I don't want Flacco. I don't want Winston. Somebody else. Maybe it's Cousins. Maybe it's Andy Dalton. Not a guy who's a long-term answer. Kirk Cousins stinks. He can't play. But just a veteran so you don't have to rush whatever rookie you get, especially if it's an early round pick. And if it's a later round pick, the guy might not be good enough to play. And you take some lumps, but you got to show progress as an organization next year. And then but at some point in the next couple of years, you've got to find that quarterback. You absolutely have to find that next quarterback sometime in the next 2 years. Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry may not have 2 chances. It may have to happen this year. I don't know what Jimmy Haslam's thinking. But the Deshaun Watson part of this is over. That's over. That's off the plate. Kevin Stefanski can get back to doing his style of offense, which for the most part has been successful to a degree. This year was a complete disaster. They were meshing 2 systems. It didn't work. Ken Dorsey's a terrible coordinator. Josh Allen's been a million times better since he's been gone, from the second half of last year to this year, and it was a no-brainer to move on from him. Andy Dickerson, he had kind of lost his job anyway, because the reports were that Mike Vrabel was running the offensive line. So obviously Andy Dickerson was going to go. They didn't make any other changes. The other coordinators will stay. They'll stay with Jim Schwartz, great first year, bad second year. They'll stay with Bubba Ventrone at special teams, great first year, great first year, bad second year. I don't blame Bubba Ventrone for Dustin Hopkins, but the rest of the special teams was not particularly good either in terms of returns and coverage and stuff like that. So that was an issue there. In terms of the draft, we've been talking about it all year. The Browns do have the second pick. We know they're in play for quarterback. We know they're in play for potential trades. The Titans at 1 will very likely take a quarterback. The Giants at 3 are going to want a quarterback. I don't know that maybe the Browns trade. The Browns don't want to take a quarterback. Maybe they trade down 1 spot, get some extra picks. Other potential trade partners, if the Browns don't want a quarterback, you got the Raiders at 6. You got the Jets at 7. I believe you got the Saints at 9. I don't know how far the Browns would be willing to trade down. I don't know if they're willing to trade down at all. But all those teams could potentially be in the mix to trade up to the 2 spot for a quarterback. Ideally, you don't drop too far and you still get whatever the best player available is besides quarterback if that's not the direction you want to go. Now, you can see here my picture of Nick Chubb, my favorite Browns player. Thought there was some interesting comments from Andrew Berry today that made me think that maybe Nick Chubb is not going to be in uniform. When asked about Myles Garrett, he obviously Andrew Berry's not going to admit they're willing to trade him, but he said, hey, he's going from Cleveland to I was going to say Cooperstown, but it's Canton. And he said they're not going to trade Myles Garrett. That's really up to Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett ultimately wants out of here, then they will trade him. They'll get 2 first-round picks, maybe more, we'll see. But he didn't say the same thing about Nick Chubb. Now, it's a different story because Myles Garrett's under contract. Nick Chubb is not. I think in a perfect world, the Browns are able to bring back Nick Chubb. He cannot be the lead back, or at least he can't be counted on to be the lead back at this point, because we don't know if Nick Chubb's got anything left in the tank. It happens that quick. You go from superstar to out of the league in a hurry. Nick Chubb will play probably somewhere in 2025, but if he still doesn't have it, he could be out of the league by 2026. I hope that's not the case. I hope he bounces back from his massive injury 2 years ago and gets back to being great back, but only time will tell. If I'm the Browns, I can't let him get into another uniform. I think Nick Chubb would stay. I'd offer him a very low base salary with incentives again, but this is a position that has to be addressed, whether it's the draft or free agency, and I don't think the Browns could be too bold in free agency this year, dealing with all the contracts they're already dealing with. This team has got to focus on the draft and focus on getting valuable assets from these high picks, something they have not been able to do. They have wasted, let's call it like it is, the last 5 draft picks. The last 5 first-round picks, 3 were used on Watson, 1 Greg Newsome, starter but not great, and 1 Jedrick Wills, bad starter, who's, we're going to re-sign either of them, which means they weren't worthy of the pick. And just like we talked about, the team has to make progress on the field. Andrew Berry's got to start turning it around. The draft has just not been good enough. There's been a few hits, but there's been way more misses than hits. He's done some other things well in terms of trades, but the Browns have to hit a home run in this draft. They cannot blow it. They blow it, it's all over for everybody. Obviously, especially with that second overall pick. And whether they go defensive line to get another pass rusher to work with Myles Garrett or potentially replace him, whether they go offensive line, take a tackle to try to start over at that left tackle position because you can't rely on DeJuan Jones, who's just too inconsistent with staying on the field early in his career. Whether they do go quarterback or whether they go with Hunter and go with this wild card player who is he going to be a corner and wide receiver? Is he going to be one or the other? We don't know. It's going to be fascinating to see what they do. But whatever it is they end up doing with that second pick, whether it's drafting somebody there or trading down, the Browns have to get it right. There's no maybes. There's no, he's okay, but he wasn't worth. You got the second pick. This is the highest pick Andrew Berry has had. They cannot blow it. They have 2 of the top 34 picks. That second round pick, 34. I mean, that's got to be a big win too. That's at the very least, that guy better be a good starter. I'm not saying he's got to be a Hall of Famer at 34, but he better be a good starter, not just a guy. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and the Browns are on their heels somewhat. They're going to be under fire this offseason. They're going to be on the hot seat to start next season. Let's see if Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry can thrive under pressure, or will they collapse? We'll find out in the next year. Sucks that it's going to be a long time until we have Browns, although I don't know that anybody wants the Browns play right now. One wants to watch the Browns play right now, but there will be playoff football, of course. Let's give you the latest point spreads for the playoff games. Saturday at 4:30, the first game, Chargers-Texans. At Bet Rivers, we have that as the Chargers -2.5 on the road. I'll give you my picks later in the week. Dustin and I'll do that on Thursday. The Saturday 8 p.m. game is Steelers-Ravens, obviously a great one in Baltimore. Always a great rivalry. Ravens are a 9.5-point favorite. Steelers have been terrible down the stretch, especially on offense. Spread feels a little high, though, especially since it's a rivalry game. Sunday triple header, 1 o'clock, Broncos-Bills. The Bills are a 9-point favorite. Hard to not like the Bills in that one, but we'll see. The 4:30 game on Sunday is Packers-Eagles in Philly. The Eagles are a 5.5-point favorite at Bet Rivers. The Sunday night game, the Washington Commanders at Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Bucks. The Bucks are a 3-point favorite. Kudos to Baker. He had a great season. He was a top 10 quarterback this year. What can I tell you? I mean, the guy I think he finished tied for second with Lamar Jackson with passing touchdowns, 3rd or 4th in terms of total touchdowns. Did throw too many picks, but you can't even say he threw a lot of picks. But he played great when it mattered. I got to give him full credit. Yesterday was his first comeback of 10 and more points ever. He played tremendous in the last 2 possessions in the Sunday game that locked up there. They would have gotten the playoffs anyway because the Falcons ended up losing in overtime. But certainly the Buccaneers didn't know that. That game was very much in the balance at the time. So kudos to Baker. Made some great throws. He is a different player in Tampa Bay. He has matured. Both his game and personally, he has matured. And, I've sent the guy a lot of hate. I didn't like him, but it's hard to dislike him right now. He's playing great. I'm not going to be one of these sore losers who makes excuses. Oh, he's in a bad division. That's true, but come on. The guy played great this year. There's no way around it. He didn't make the Pro Bowl, but he'll be, I think he was the first alternate, and he'll end up getting there. He's not top 5, but he had a tremendous season. He's a top 10 quarterback this year. There's no doubt about it. Now, Jaden Daniels played great too, so that should be a pretty exciting game Sunday night. And then the Monday night game, the Vikings at the Rams. Obviously, that's the game that probably most people are least excited about, although it should be close. In terms of the point spread, it's actually the closest game, but it's weird. Just because the Vikings season ended weird, they played so poorly on Sunday Night Football against the Lions. As bad as Sam Darnold looked all year, the Rams are kind of blah at the moment, but it actually should be a pretty good game, Vikings-Rams. I don't know, really have a good feel for where I'm going. I'm leaning with the Vikings. And again, I started the show talking about prisoner of the moment. Don't want to be prisoner of the moment and be negative about the Vikings just because their last game was bad. Unlike the Steelers, it was a whole bad month of play. With the Vikings, it was really just 1 week. I mean, they still finished 14-3. It was a pretty amazing season for them. All right, one other thing I wanted to get into, the Cavs, they'll play Wednesday night in a game that's going to be on national TV, and I just can't wait. The Cavs have won 10 in a row. They've won 14 of 15. They're 31-4 on the season. They get 2 days off following this weekend. On Friday, they beat Dallas. I know there's no Kyrie and no Luka. And Kyrie's so weak for not playing. I don't buy that he was sick. I mean, if he is, then I'm bad on me, but I don't buy that. He never plays against the Cavs. Charlotte stinks. They won that game to get to 31-4 last night. The Wednesday game's on ESPN. They're playing Oklahoma City twice in the next in an 8-day stretch on Wednesday, this Wednesday the 8th, and then next Thursday the 16th. That game's in Oklahoma City. The first game this Wednesday on ESPN. The second one is on TNT or True TV or Max if you have that. They're also on TNT against the Pacers next week. But I can't wait. I mean, seems like lately every time the Cavs play a good team, some of their better players sit. We saw that against Boston. We saw it against Milwaukee and Philly and Dallas this weekend. But the Cavs are just crushing everybody they play. In this 10-game winning streak, they've won all 10 games by double digits. In fact, the Cavs in their last 14 games, they're 13-1. Obviously, they lost that game to Miami where they played really poorly. The other 13 games in which they won them all by 10 or more points, which is crazy. It's just wild how they're playing. But Oklahoma City is right on their heels. Both teams on pace for 70-plus wins. The Cavs are 31-4. Oklahoma City is 30-5. There'll be no, situation where one team's going to get more rest than the other. Both teams played yesterday. Both teams are off today and tomorrow. And then both teams will play in Cleveland on Wednesday. The Thunder lately, unbelievably, came back, beat the Knicks by 10. They beat Boston by 13 yesterday, so 2 great wins in a row for them. After the Cavs, they play the Knicks again on Friday. Then they got a couple of softer games before they play the Cavs and Dallas. So they're in the midst of a tough schedule, and yet they've won, I think they've won 10 in a row also. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, they've won 10 in a row and 15 of 16. So both these teams playing unbelievable basketball, both on pace for 70-plus wins, which is incredible. And I can't wait for this game. I'm excited that it's on ESPN. I'm going to be locked in Wednesday night for this one. Thanks, everybody, for joining me today. Thanks to Z and Max for producing. Again, Joe Thomas joins me on Wednesday's podcast, and then Thursday we'll be live at 2, Dustin and I. Until then, everybody have a great day. Talk to you next time. Where else but right here in the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, brought to you by Bet Rivers. See you, everybody.